Hello everyone, welcome to Lush and Salty Aquariums. My name is Stefan. Thank you so much for coming to the channel. So we're in front of the 32-gallon long bookshelf aquarium. Sits center of my rack system to the left of my fish room. This has been affectionately called the Red Swarm in past videos. It is primarily, at this point, just an intense group of black and red colored live bearers encompassing the swordtail, platy, and molly family. And as you can see, I have just a plethora of fish, and it's too many. I've culled a few of the off-color fish, brought them to my LFS. I had some peach colored mollies, perfectly fine fish, but they stood out in a way that I don't know, just didn't appeal to me from an aesthetic point of view. So I was able to catch those out and give them to somebody who didn't mind having them in his inventory. Thing is, I wanted to bring some of these smaller juveniles that you can see just amidst the red swarm here of the fish fry. I'll try to maybe single in. They're just beautiful. Look at, I'm trying to find that one red one right there. Are you seeing it? Anyway, of course it's impossible to do that, but there are so many half-inch fish in here. But the guy that I would bring these to, the LFS, he doesn't want fish he can't sell, and I don't blame him. And so if I brought him very small juveniles, he'd have to spend the time and tank space, the food, the resources to grow them up to a sellable condition. And honestly, that's just not how to make a living selling ornamental fish from a store. So I don't have a go-to person here in Chicago that I can make a quick trade or donation. Otherwise I would do that. So any of you out there in the Chicagoland area want to come by my fish room, I'll catch you out a half dozen beautiful small Mollies Swordtail Platies. Won't necessarily be able to distinguish which kind they are. I can't even at this point. I know there were some fancier veal tail swordtails. You can see I'll focus in on one. Look at that glorious creature right there, not moving. Him or her. Sometimes with the high fin or the veal tail live bears, the females in their own way are even more exotic or fanciful looking than the males. And I think that's a female right there, that with the red shoulder and the long fins. But anyway, there's also the classic intense red molly with fancy fins. And then there's the tuxedo platy. There's one right there. Now that's a classic example of a tuxedo platy, the orange and black. There's clearly been a significant amount of crossbreeding in this tank. I think that's the result, where you see some of the fancy fins on what otherwise looks like a tuxedo platy. And I could just go on and speculate, pontificate. The bottom line is they're gorgeous fish. I'm getting primarily just a deep red or deep black offspring, and that's what I wanted for this tank, whose theme has been red and black from Jump Street. Now, if we look closely, we will find the original inhabitants, some longfin white cloud mountain minnows. There's one right there. And to some degree, they comprise the red and black motif. But the tank evolved into this theme, if you will, by accident. Discovering, oh no, year and a half, 2 years ago, maybe a trio of fancy swordtails, and getting them at a swap and just putting them in with the White Cloud Mountain minnows. And then Sydney's Angels, Dan over there, made a donation to my daughter's music school of some of these tuxedo platies, and he gave me a whole bag of them, his whole inventory at the time. And I kept a couple of them, and there you have it. This is the result 2 years later. So I feed these fish and take care of them at a very, very high level. I meant to say I feed them very, very varied and wonderful diet, both vegetarian, live, frozen, and you can see the result. Now, there's too many fish in here, I get that, and I don't know what to do about it, so that's what I've been talking about. Anyone in the Chicagoland area who thinks these are pretty spectacular as I do, hit me up and we'll work something out. Now, when you have this many fish in an aquarium, they look incredibly beautiful, but at this quantity, I think it violates the serenity from my human eyes. Maybe the fish are fine, and the reason I say they're fine is because not only did they grow up in this environment, so it's not being thrust into something they're unfamiliar with, but moreover, this aquarium is very highly filtered. I've got a Biomaster canister, the 600, I think, or no, it's only the 350, I think, I forget. But it's over filtered for a 30-gallon, or it's at par for what you want there. But in addition, you don't see I have another Oase Filto Smart hang on the back canister. It's sort of tucked into all that pothos over there, and that's filtering out on this side and pushing clean water, filtered water this way. And the canister, the main canister, you can see the outflow right there is pushing water towards that filter, which pushes it this way and back and around. There's CO2 in this aquarium, as well as an air stone that turns on at night to push oxygen into the water, create that disturbance, that gas transference. And then I do 40% water change every week, and I constantly am trimming and cleaning the plants that are in here. So the plants that are in here, speaking of which, in keeping with the red theme, I was able to finally sort out what I wanted to do in the back left-hand corner. I've got this gorgeous red tiger lotus, which is really doing a wonderful job at this point. I had moved this plant from various different aquariums, but it's found its niche here. You see one of the larger pads that I've left intact with that wonderful flowing stem, and then a nice compact growth of crimson leaves right down here, and we can see the bulb finally. For a while it was growing, but the bulb wasn't really attached to the substrate. But in a few weeks, those tendrils, all those white roots, they will find agency in your aquarium and stabilize, and that's what's happened here. So that flow of the red across helps get me from left to right in this tank from an aesthetic perspective. And you see all the Anubias that has anchored itself over time onto the substrate in the mid-ground of the tank, just to the right of that tiger lotus. You can see this beautiful flower that's already peaked, so it'll start to deteriorate but there'll be another one soon after. I see a couple buds in the aquarium here. That's old growth Anubias. And you see the fresher, lighter colored leaves and the more deeper colored leaves. There's a couple different kinds of Anubias in there, to be sure, so it's not all just old and new, but different kinds as well. You can see from the top, it occupies a long stretch, helping your eye, helping the flow from left to right. In front of it, moving back a little bit, I've got some Sturgeon repens there on the left. A lovely little group. That's 2 stems of mermaid weed. I just had a little bit extra from a different tank, and I put them in here to see, because I get such great growth from certain hard to grow stems, for me anyway, like this Lemonphilia hyperoides. I can't get success with this plant in any of my other tanks in the way that it does in here. Now I have some clay-based substrate, Oliver Platt. It's a clay-based substrate along with some UNS contra soil and some sand and gravel. But I believe something in that clay-based substrate is what makes a difference for some of the plants, at least, you know, and how they grow in this tank better than in any other. And this is a particular example. About every month and a half, I pull all of these stems out, take the lovely tops and replant them. And that's what I do, as opposed to cutting them halfway. I just find it's better for the overall look of the plant, especially in small groups, where you don't want that double stem coming from a single stem, which is what happens every time you cut halfway in 90% of your stem plants. That's what you'll get, and it doesn't look good unless you have a nice cluster or bunch, and you know, you're willing to maintain the bush effect, so you don't see that like pitchfork looking growth where you have one stalk and smaller stalks coming out of it. This is a little bit of Halanthium in here, Halanthium tellum, I believe. And then over here, this is interesting, folks. I had the most intense group of Blixa japonica. You see the smallest bits of it left there, but I over pruned it. I took too many of the plants out and used them in other aquariums, at least to maintain the colony here. And for whatever reason, its status quo was hurt too much, and it's fading. But in its place, I put some tops of my Ludwigia Super Red, and these are only 2 to 3 inches tall pieces right now. Well, maybe 4, but they sort of spread a little wide. In any event, the small group, when you think about the theme of red and black, is more on point than the Blixa was. The Blixa was a more rare and wonderful plant to have been doing so well in here, but I have plenty of the offshoots of that faded Blixa doing really, really well in other tanks. So one way I keep this aquascape fresh and new is with these different plants, like that red tiger lotus, keeping little oddballs like that mermaid weed, while maintaining the integrity of the main plants like the Anubias, and in the back a perfect wall of leopard veil, Vallisneria. You see it up top there. The main roots are in the back left, but there's plenty of plants that are spread across, and in general they create a biomass, a green wall through 3/4 of the tank exactly. If you could see through the red swarm, now you can see back there the perfect green wall of Vallisneria. And then just finishing up with the plants, I have a small cryptocorn forest here. I forget the species here. This is all the same kind, at least it is now. It wasn't before. believe that's just a green Wendetti, but I could be wrong. And there's a slightly different cryptocorn just behind it, especially right there with the variegated leaves, a very beautiful crypt. And then to the back, I've got water sprite, and I just push that bunch down into the far right-hand corner, and occasionally, not so occasionally, periodically, almost every other time I do a major water change, I pull a pretty nice plant out of that, and I collect those and bring those to my LFS. And then finally, my mother colony, if you will, of Hydrocolte Hydrocolte, right? That's not it. I call it Japanese clover. You know this plant. And I've got it on one of these moss racks that's magnetically attached to the side of the tank. And so if I ever need or want to use this plant somewhere in a small amount, I can just pull or cut some of these from here, and I can maintain this plant without really maintaining it in terms of giving it a, I don't know, rooted place in the aquascape. Those little magnetic holders are just wonderful in terms of maintaining a plant without having the real estate to do it. And it also looks really cool. I mean, I think that looks beautiful and fills what otherwise would be sort of a reflected piece of glass on the right hand side of this tank. And it makes it, it just completes the aquascape for me. I already pointed out the pothos, couple varieties growing out from a print-on-demand box, acrylic box in the back. I forgive the reflection, you can maybe see some of the roots, but it's so well married into the background of this aquarium, which is nice because sometimes those roots are not as desirable on this, from an aesthetic point of view. They could be a little bit raw looking, unless you're doing a biotope where those roots are a natural part of the look you were aspiring to achieve. In this tank, if that was the case in the beginning, it really isn't now, so I'm glad I don't see them as much. But I love having the pothos up at the top on both sides, just marrying the tank to the racking system, to some of the decoration on the outside, and ultimately to the fish room itself. So back to these swordtails, platies, and mollies. As I said, if you're in my neck of the woods, come see me in my fish room. We'll have a nice chat, a visit. Maybe I can hook you up with some of these lovely fish. And they are truly lovely. I think they're as good a looking as these particular species can be. I mean, black mollies, red platies, I mean, nothing here is particularly rare, but for whatever reason, I'm getting intense coloration, beautiful fins, and super healthy animals. None of the bobbing and weaving or dropsy or any of the other problems that one can find with live bears. I'm seldom getting, knock on wood, those problems here in my fish room in this particular fish tank, and I feel so lucky. There is a Hillstream loach. There was 4 in here. There should still be 4. They're not that hard to breed, and I have no doubt that animal has at least spawned in here, but I don't keep count of that fish, and I haven't seen juveniles. What I have seen juveniles of are the fish I've been talking about primarily. Now, if I could, and I will, I would catch out like that mottled sort of peachy black molly right there, that thing. That is not a sick fish. That's just the result. Sometimes when you get crossbred, the colors to the human eye just aren't as appealing. So that fish, you see how vigorous he is. But if I could have caught him out to bring him in with the others, I would have, but I just missed him. There's one Siamese algae eater, the reticulated version. I've got his bigger cousins in my bigger tank, and it's once they start to get over that 4 inches like this one is, they tend to either keep growing if your tank is bigger, or thankfully in this tank it's found its max adult size. At least that's the size I've seen him at for a long time now, right there. And he sees me and knows that generally when I'm this close, this often, it means feeding time. Even I think the Hillstream Loach knows that. There are a number of Coreodora in here. I have 2 different kinds of the longfin, the stars in my fish room. There's one there, an albino longfin, and I also have the highfin albino in here, as well as some gold lasers and some black Schwartz, what are they, Schwartz eye Coreodoras, generally the black ones, and some Plecostomus bristlenose. Let's see, I see a red one there, the super red. He's been a part of this tank for a long time now, sorry. But he's totally blended into the red substrate behind this Ludwigia super red. So red, red, red. And I can see him, but you might be having trouble, but I think you can see that body back there. I can see one of the slate colored Coreodoras. If the camera definitely, and I don't blame the technology for struggling to find out what the hell it's supposed to look at in this aquarium. It's kind of a feast for the eyes, isn't it? If you're gonna have this many fish, you gotta take care of them to keep the water this good, to keep them this healthy. It can be done, but you have to overfilter, and you have to just take the kind of care that I'm willing to put in to my fish room, to my fish tanks. It's a labor of love, and mostly I'm okay with overstock, heavy population like this, but I recognize this is too much of a good thing, which is why I'm trying to figure out a strategy for humanely culling some of these beautiful fish. I don't have other aquariums for them, and that's why I'm appealing to you out there. Ultimately, if I don't hear from anyone, I'll just catch a dozen fish and try to get them of the size more closer to the adult size and bring those bigger ones to my LFS, but I'd rather take some of the smaller ones and find homes for them. But either way, and it's a high class problem because none of these fish are suffering, and it's one of my favorite aquariums for precisely the reason that I think it's also reached its break point in terms of fish population. But I tend to love that when my eye can just gaze, I can get lost just staring at this tank, not knowing which fish to focus on. It is like a snow globe of red, a red swarm, like watching a campfire, right? You just get lost looking at all the flames crackling. That's a great metaphor. It's like a campfire where the red and the black and the orange, you just stare at it. And that's why campfires are so hypnotic and wonderful. And in a way, this aquarium, although it's a completely different thing, has a similar hypnotic quality. Even if sometimes the frenetic crackling flames can have a different energy, almost an aggressive or intense vibe to it. If I adjust my own internal mindset to be more like observing a crackling fire, or just the back and forth, sort of that snow globe I talked about, it really can be just a wonderfully hypnotic experience. But before I hypnotize you all into a coma, let me say thank you for coming. And as always, keep your hands in the tank, albeit carefully, and ciao for now.